I'm Sharadi Jassa and welcome to Labor Lens. Thank you for joining us on today's edition of the program. We will be focusing on NLC at 40. But first, let's begin with the news. The Industrial Global Union Federation National Council celebrates the 2018 International Women's Day with the theme Press for Progress. The day started with a walk from the headquarters of the National Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers at Jibowu to Yaba, Lagos. Labor leaders at the event took time to create greater awareness about the essence of the International Women's Day celebration via one-on-one interaction with other non-union members they encountered during the walk. Their message was, it's time to press forward and make progress in the area of gender parity.
We are drawing attention to the plight of women. As you speak, there's a lot of discrimination. We also want to use this occasion to demand for equal pay for women for the jobs that they do. Apart from that, a state of emergency has to be declared within the educational sector, especially in the northeast of the country. We are using this occasion to call for the rescue of the Dapchi girls, the Chibok girls. Government must be more responsible and responsive and also demonstrate enough political will.
Women issues are trade union issues. They are human issues. An injury to any woman is an injury to all of us. And don't forget, last year we were marching for release of remaining Chibok girls. But sadly, this year again, 111 Dapchi girls have been taken away. So we are using today to call on all our leaders, governors, president to be on duty and protect all our schools.
Just after the walk, a lecture was delivered that evaluated the protection of women's rights at the workplace.
That's the day we try to create awareness to people, to government, to the masses about the need for women to be involved in the mainstream of every activities, be it politics, be it decision taking, be it in the union movement, even to also campaign against some of this violence.
A unanimous decision by the Global Union is that the International Women's Day belongs to all groups and that it is an opportunity to collectively think, act, and be gender sensitive. The Nigerian Labour Congress (NLC) is an umbrella body for trade unions in Nigeria. It was founded in 1978 following a merger of four different organizations: Nigerian Trade Union Congress, Labour Unity Front, United Labour Congress, and Nigeria Workers' Council. The numerous affiliated unions were restructured into 42 industrial unions. During its history, conflicts with the military regime twice led to the dissolution of the NLC's national organs, the first in 1988 under the military regime of General Ibrahim Babangida, and the second in 1994 under the regime of General Sani Abacha. Under Nigeria's military government, labor leaders were frequently arrested and union meetings disrupted. Comrade Hassan Simonu, who was the first president of the Nigerian Labour Congress between February 1978 to February 1984, and under his leadership, the union was able to achieve the first minimum wage in May 1981.
The labor movement has done a lot, not only for the workers of Nigeria, but also for the people of Nigeria and for the Nigerian nation. Because if you remember, in the last 40 years of its existence, we have had military dictatorships. We've had civilian administration, another military intervention before we started having, uninterrupted civilian administration, democratic dispensation from 1999. So, and if you see the ups and downs for the country itself during these 40 years, but for the Nigerian Labour Congress, the fate of Nigeria would have been worse.
NLC went through rough times. In 1988, its national structures were dissolved by the Babangida military regime because of its opposition to the Structural Adjustment Program and fuel price hikes. Later, an administrator was appointed to govern NLC. In 1994, the military regime of General Sani Abacha again dissolved NLC's National Executive Council and appointed its sole administrator because of the union's insistence for the restoration of democracy.
Because of the commitment of the state councils, they brought the raw data. They participated in the decision making. They go and implement whatever it is at their state level effectively. That helped in the growth and the strength and the development of Congress.
Following democratic reforms in the country, some of the anti-union regulations were abolished in January 1999. The same month, Adams Oshiomhole was elected president of the reformed organization. Today, the NLC has more than 40 affiliated unions, and according to their own figures, they cater for up to 4 million members. This makes the NLC one of the largest trade union organizations in Africa. The NLC has led several general strikes protesting the government's fuel price policy. In September 2004, the NLC gave the federal government an ultimatum to reverse the decision to reintroduce the controversial fuel tax or face a nationwide protest strike. Nigeria has had many colorful labor leaders, starting from Chief Michael Imodu, the nation's first union labor leader. Under his leadership, the union demanded for higher pay, the casualization of workers, and for the improved conditions for technical workers. NLC's first very dynamic president in 1978 was Alhaji Hassan Sumonu, who was succeeded by Ali Chiroma in 1984. The late Pascal Bafayu was NLC president from 1988 to 1994. One of the most exciting and memorable NLC leaders, Adams Oshiomhole, who came from the textile sector in 1999 when democracy was restored after military rule. He later became governor of Edo State. Oshiomhole led strikes and protests against fuel price hike. He also negotiated 25% wage increase to public sector workers during Obasanjo's administration. After Oshiomhole came Abdul Wahid Omar of the Teachers Union, who was elected NLC president in 2007. Then came the current president Ayuba Waba, who came from the Health Workers Union and was elected in 2015.
Struggles in the interest of workers, some of them are systemic and we can anticipate them. There are others that do emerge periodically, even without expectation. Even those that you are tackling, there are dynamics associated. They can become even more complicated and all that. Clearly, as of today, among the challenges that we face are the issues of the huge unemployment, which renders the labor market very problematic.
The last few years has, however, been very tough for NLC, where rulers once trembled at the mention of its name, and especially when it threatened to go on strike. These days, NLC is not as potent as it used to be. Many reasons account for this turn of events, including the collapse of some powerful economic sectors, factionalism among labor leaders, and also the weak national economy.
As we move ahead, we need to pursue the issue of unity in the movement. The issue of unity, for me, is not negotiable. It's clearly not negotiable. The fact that we have had problem of disunity has weakened our ability to pursue quite a lot of things. And I think now we have to sacrifice. We have to forget about self-ambition. We must genuinely work on reconciliation so that our colleagues who appear aggrieved, who have left for one reason or the other, should come back so that we have a united front.
The NLC at 40 celebration was celebrated for 3 days, and on this occasion, thousands of workers were in attendance. Many were given awards, and some were called to the NLC Hall of Fame. for the NLC to continue in the struggle to defend workers' interests. It was concluded at the 40th anniversary celebration that workers needed a political platform through which they can collaborate with credible civil society groups, actively participate in policy making, and drive implementation process. Attaining the next level of national development also means government must become responsible and responsive in meeting the plight of the working class, ensuring that the dignity of labor is realized and the potentials of industry is maximized.
NLC so far has been very slow and steady on track in the course of the struggle for the working class people in Nigeria, and it has been a very perfect one. And I generally want to believe too well that in the last 40 years, it has been a progressive movement, steadily, though slow. But in it all, we have every cause to say things are working out gradually. And if the tempo is sustained and maintained the way it is with the current leadership under Comrade Ayuba Wamba, MNI, I do believe too well that we'll be able to sustain a better things for the working class people in Nigeria.
Nigerian Labour Congress has fared relatively well in the past 40 years. You know, if you take into account its origins, you know, we're talking about the third NLC in the historical sense. In fact, in that context, for instance, this is the longest NLC. The third NLC is actually the longest NLC. Whereas it's the same NLC, but this is about the longest NLC. And it has fared well in spite of all the challenges. We have had our ups and downs, but on the scorecard, I think NLC has done well. Tackling its own core issues and tackling social issues. In fact, let me put it this way, socio-economic issues.
On the Profile interview segment this week, I spoke with Comrade Governor Adams Oshomole. He shares with me the struggles, the pains, the success, and perhaps the failure of the movement. He spoke to me about what it was like being the fourth NLC president. And I must tell you, it was an engaging, informative, and interesting conversation. Take a listen. You're welcome to the program.
My pleasure. Sharon.
A lot has been said about the Nigerian Labour Congress, and it's celebrating its 40th anniversary. What's your take on it?
I think for several reasons. 40 years of unorganized labor, talking about a mass movement in the entire black world. NSC is the largest non-governmental, membership-driven, membership-funded organization in the black world. And so to survive 40 years, and during this period, NSC had its own fair share of military abuse of power. 2 or 3 times it was dissolved by successive military governments, and it outlived those governments. And even other civilian administration, under President Obasanjo, there was a bill to the House in which the president wanted NSC to be deregistered, and we fought back. And of course, they succeeded in creating TUC out of that. And but again, the TUC has since found common grounds to work in harmony and in unity, and wherever it matters, in unison, to deal with all of those issues that affect the world of work, and indeed matters affecting workers and working families. So I think for several reasons, NSC has, it's a title to this celebration.
You were the president of the Nigerian Labour Congress between February 1999 to February 2007.
Correct.
What would you say are your achievements?
It is not for me to, score myself. I would be more comfortable if people were to play back the NSC role in the Nigeria polity, economy, and society during those periods and form opinion about my role what the NSC was under my leadership. That will offer me more comfort than asking me what I think. But I think that, first, beginning with the unity of the NLC, which the then president wanted to undermine by proposing a legislation which expressly, among other things, provided for the deregistration of the NLC. And I remember people saying I should go and plead with the president not to dissolve the NLC. And I said, no, NLC will not bow before presidents. NLC will stand on its feet. It will fight, either win or lose, but on its feet. I won't order NLC under my leadership. We will go on our knees to plead with any administration. And I submitted that the future and the unity of the movement was not at the pleasure of the president of the day, and that NLC will outlive President Obasanjo's government. And it is history. So that for me is something. I also believe that we sufficiently moderated the then president not to do some of the things that, in our judgment, were going to grossly erode the living standard of workers and indeed working families. And we engage him on all of those issues. We also engage him on issues that has to do with democratic principles. And perhaps the best way to measure whether these engagements meant anything is to play back the national broadcast of President Obasanjo, where he accused me and said Oshiomhole was behaving as alternate president and the NSC was behaving like a parallel government. Now, when the president makes a national broadcast like that, more or less accusing me of treason, it shows the amount of discomfort that we have created for him. And for me, that summarizes the extent to which we were able to speak, not just speak truth to power or back, but also to bite wherever it was necessary. And it goes beyond the one that people often talk about. Of course, we raised the minimum wage from, as it then was, 2,200 naira or so to 5,500 by law. And through negotiation, we got the federal government to adopt 7,500 naira minimum wage, and the oil producing states to have the same 7,500 minimum wage, and the other states from between 6,000 to 7,000 across the country. Now, by today's standard, that doesn't make much sense, but when you recognize that we increase the figure from 2,200 or 2,500 to those numbers, you are talking about between 100 and 200% increase.
Which moves me to my next question. You're known to actively engage the government and the workers effectively. I would like to ask you, what do you think, what does it actually take to ensure that we have a vibrant labor union by ensuring that there's active engagement between the government and the workers?
For me, more than anybody else in society, the union man has to be sharp. He has to be grounded in everything. He has to be jack of all trade and master of all, because the issues you confront covers the economy, the polity, and society. And you must be able to engage convincingly, because we are persuading followers to decide who to believe. Because don't forget, as much as workers are members of trade unions, they are also, some of them, members of political parties. And indeed, they also can tell you, and it is a fact, that they did vote for these governments, whether at the federal, state, or local government level. So just the same way as they voted for you through a direct election to become the president of their own movement. So when you engage the government, which they participate in electing, you have to convince them that what the government is doing is wrong, and that what you're asking them to do is right, and that your own solutions or suggestions as to policy options are doable and that they will be more beneficial. How they resolve that, who they choose to believe, determine at the end of the day the strength of trade unions. Because if people don't follow your action, you threaten, and it doesn't come to pass, your threat lose potency, and over time, government would listen, no employers will listen.
Okay, talking about credibility, I would like to ask you, I've learned so far that most times getting credible leaders starts from the academics. That is, it starts from the teachers, the lecturers, to students, then it comes out as a total, what I call it now, a total package. So I would like to ask you, how would you rate the education sector in Nigeria, and how do you think instilling the right discipline and principles of survival for an average worker should be instilled in students?
You really don't know anyone until you are trusting with power. There are no scientific instrument to read a man or a woman and say, he will be like this. So until you give him power, you really don't know who or she is. We've seen it here. Everybody seems to be an angel until he's challenged with certain realities and certain levels of temptation. How he reacts to those define ultimately this issue of character. But I think the point I was also seeking to make is that in those days when people like Professor Ejega were in the university system, they produce what you might call very progressive student community, that were deep, not just in their field of study. It didn't matter whether they were reading medicine, they were reading pharmacy, engineering, but they were sufficiently exposed to issues around the political economy, radical thoughts, what was going on around the world, in Cuba, the difference between the socialist countries and the capitalist countries, the promise of the market system, Karl Marx's critique of capitalism and the socialist alternative. All of those things help to deepen the workers' understanding of the world that they live in. And as they grow up to approach the real world, they have some clarity about alternative possibilities, right? Now, those were the days we talk about Bala Usman brought up in ABU, a very rich left-wing community that were being built and developed by lecturers who themselves were quite knowledgeable and very, very progressive. Now, unfortunately, we do no longer have that kind of thing, which is why the Nigeria Students' Union, NANS, is no longer what it used to be in those days because the baking ground is, has been eroded.
I'm actually really concerned about the youths of today and looking at the labor sector. And since you've said knowledge is power and we need to be equipped with what is needed to ensure that we survive in the 21st century, what do you think is the way forward in capturing the young minds?
Yeah, I think that the organized labor should show sufficient interest on matters that have to do with quality of education. We are not just talking about the university system, important as it is. The foundation, we have in law what you call universal basic education, under which it is compulsory and mandatory for every child of school age to be in school. And yet, in spite of that law, the average of out-of-school population, I think, around the country, national average, might be around maybe 20% or 25%. Because in some states, it is as high as 50% or more than 50%. While in some other states, it's as low as 6%. I think the lowest is Ekiti and Edo State. Ekiti around 6, Edo about 6.7% out of school. From that bottom, it goes up to 50, I think up to 55% out of school population. Now, by the time you interrogate the content and the quality of those schools, if you define a school, it tells of any environment in which there's somebody in front, posing as a teacher, and some little kids behind, listening. If that's your definition, then this answer is valid. But if you go to interrogate the quality of the teaching staff and the teaching environment, the quality of the classroom, then the situation becomes even much more frightening. In Edo State, I did try to address this because for me, the way to pay back God's favor in my life is to restore and strengthen the ladder that made it possible for me as a small boy born to a very humble family in a typical rural Nigeria, you know, but benefiting from free quality primary education. That was the only foundation I needed to be able to resort to self-help thereafter by way of training and retraining and going to school to further my education and to be able to work and get to the level of, you know, a Fatiha and becoming a governor of a state as complex and as sophisticated as Edo State. So education is the key, and anyone who wishes to pay back public debts, you must invest in education. Not rhetoric, not just symbolism, in terms of real content.
Is there any experience you can't forget being the NLC president?
Yes, quite a number. I think there was a day at about 2 a.m. the government decided to remove all the securities in my house, whether they were my own employees or whoever they were, including one or two policemen that were attached to me to protect the house. And one of them just called me and said, "Oga, you are alone now in the house. We have all been withdrawn, even the local Megaidi, the gate men, everybody has been taken away. So I suspect that they are about to do something terrible, and they don't want any witnesses." It's about 2 a.m. But fortunately, I had a guy who was living in my guest house. I got down, I checked the gate, I saw that everybody was gone, but this guy in his innocence was the only one sleeping, and my driver, they were fair enough to leave the driver. And I called him, "Tony, now we have to get out of this house." I had to do a couple of things which I can't explain in camera to be able to fool the police and the SSS that had surrounded my house, you know, get them to move, thinking they were chasing me, whereas I wasn't the one, and then find a way to escape from my house. And now the challenge was, having successfully escaped, where do I hide? I was too, as they say, whether it's a golden fish or it's a silver fish, some kind of fish simply can't hide. And people don't know that you are running away from trouble. They want to announce that you are with them, and with excitement, with good intention. And I managed to find where to stay, and I stayed there until the following day morning. I was able to call the NSA to tell them what was happening. And my driver was hijacked on the road, stopped, but the police thought I had some magic. They believe I disappeared from the car. And then they decided to say, these Benin people, these Edo people. But there was nothing mystic. I was just 1 inch ahead of them.
It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you, Sharon.
And that's all we can take on this edition of Labor Lens. Join us next time for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember, labor creates wealth.